Have you ever found yourself living a life you never imagined, where your heart pulls you in one direction, but the world judges you for it? My name is Valentina, and today, I'll share my deeply personal story of betrayal, heartbreak, and unexpected love that changed my life forever. Stay with me until the end, because what I discovered in the most challenging moments may change the way you see relationships and your own journey to happiness. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, I encourage you to click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay updated on all our latest content. I'm eager to hear your thoughts on today's topic. If you enjoy the content, please comment 1 below. If it doesn't resonate with you, leave a 0. Your feedback is crucial as it helps me create better videos that align with your interests. Now, let's get started. My name is Valentina, and I am 28 years old. Today, I stand before you to share a story that has shaken the very foundation of my life, something I never in my wildest dreams thought would happen to me. You may judge me harshly, or perhaps your heart will ache with empathy as you hear my words. But the truth is, life doesn't always follow the plans we so carefully lay out. Sometimes, it pulls us into the darkest corners of our souls, revealing parts of ourselves we never wanted to face. And that's exactly what happened to me. I used to believe I knew who I was, a woman of conviction, with a clear sense of direction. But life, in its relentless unpredictability, shattered that image, leaving me vulnerable and confused. It tested me, broke me, and forced me to confront parts of myself that I would have preferred to bury deep down, never to see the light of day. I married Enrique, a man who, at 30, was still the same person I fell deeply in love with when we were young. We were consumed by passion and filled with dreams of a bright future. I thought we were unstoppable. But life has a way of wearing down even the strongest bonds. Not long after we exchanged vows, Enrique lost his job. It wasn't just a job that was lost. It was a piece of him. He spiraled into a deep pit of frustration, bitterness, and complacency. Days turned into months, and soon, his days were spent lost in a haze of alcohol and video games, his energy for life drained away. I watched the vibrant man I once adored, the one who used to make my heart race with excitement, slip away from me, becoming a shadow of himself. His constant refrain of "times are tough for everyone" echoed in the house, but deep down, I knew it was an excuse, a shield he used to hide behind because he had lost the will to change. It was devastating to witness. Each day, I felt a piece of my heart break a little more as I tried to juggle my own work, our mounting debts, and the emotional weight of watching the man I loved disappear right before my eyes. Our finances crumbled around us, and before long, we were suffocating under the burden of debt. We had no choice but to move into his father's house, a decision that felt like the ultimate surrender to failure. Rogelio, Enrique's father, was 52 years old, but you'd never guess it by looking at him. He was the kind of man who seemed almost untouchable by time, his body still strong and muscular, his presence commanding any room he entered. He carried himself with a confidence and grace that made him seem larger than life, and his charisma was undeniable. His fitted shirts clung to a body that had been carefully maintained over the years, and his smile, oh, that smile, radiated warmth and charm, drawing people to him like a magnet. I was hesitant, no, terrified at the thought of moving in with him. I didn't want to be a burden, to feel like we were intruding on his life. But Rogelio welcomed us with arms wide open, his voice deep and soothing as he reassured me, "You are my family. You will always have a place here." Those words, spoken with such tenderness, pierced through my guarded heart. What I didn't expect was how deeply I would come to rely on Rogelio, not just for a place to stay, but for something far more complicated and unexpected. What started as a simple act of kindness would soon unravel into something far more intense, something I never saw coming. But there was something more about Rogelio, something intangible yet magnetic that stirred something deep within me, a pull I couldn't quite explain. Every time we were alone, I found myself caught in a quiet tension that both confused and intrigued me. As the days passed, the distance between Enrique and me grew wider, not just physically, but emotionally. He wasn't just lazy, He had become indifferent, a stranger in his own home. His late-night outings increased, and with them, so did my suspicions. The pieces of a devastating truth started to come together. Feminine scents clinging to his clothes, cryptic texts lighting up his phone at odd hours. My heart was heavy with the knowledge I couldn't yet admit to myself. Enrique was cheating on me. At first, I tried to bury the signs, telling myself that I was being paranoid, that I couldn't possibly be the woman whose husband would betray her. But denial only lasted so long. The truth, as painful as it was, started to suffocate me, choking me with every glance at his phone, every whiff of a perfume I didn't own. Deep inside, I knew my marriage was crumbling, but I was paralyzed by fear. Fear of confrontation, fear of losing what was already lost, and fear of facing a life I no longer recognized. Then, one fateful night, everything shifted. Enrique had announced he was going out with friends again, his voice devoid of any attempt at explanation. I was left alone, sitting on the couch with a book I wasn't really reading, the silence of the house pressing in on me. That's when Rogelio came in, his presence filling the room like a quiet storm. He sat down beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his body. "Are you okay, Valentina?" he asked softly, his deep voice laced with concern. I wanted to say I was fine, to offer the same practiced smile I had perfected over the past few months, but I couldn't. The facade broke, and before I knew it, tears were streaming down my face. Rogelio's arms wrapped around me, pulling me into his chest, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something other than emptiness. His embrace was firm, comforting, and intimate in a way that sent a shiver through my entire body. I could smell his familiar woody cologne, feel the strong beat of his heart against mine, and in that moment, nothing else seemed to matter. His hand moved to stroke my hair gently, and his voice, soothing and full of tenderness, whispered words of comfort that I barely registered. All I could focus on was him, his closeness, his touch, the unspoken connection between us that I had been trying so hard to ignore. And then it hit me. The tension I had been feeling wasn't just in my mind. It was real, and it had been there all along, quietly simmering beneath the surface. I felt something with Rogelio that I hadn't felt with Enrique in years, perhaps ever. It was dangerous, forbidden, and yet I couldn't help but be drawn to it. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his eyes dark and intense, and for a split second, I thought he was going to kiss me. My breath caught in my throat, and I could feel my heart pounding, but he stopped, instead reaching up to wipe away a tear from my cheek. "You deserve more, Valentina," he said softly, his voice low and rough with emotion. "Don't let Enrique make you forget who you are." Those words echoed in my mind for days, lingering like a haunting melody I couldn't shake. I tried to push away the feelings growing inside me, the longing that flared up whenever Rogelio was near, but it was impossible. With every passing day, things with Enrique worsened. He didn't even bother hiding his infidelities anymore, coming home late, drunk, and reeking of perfume that wasn't mine. I felt abandoned, emotionally adrift, but Rogelio was always there, steady, comforting, offering me the warmth I so desperately craved. One night, after another bitter argument with Enrique, I found myself standing at the edge of an emotional cliff. I watched him stumble through the door, barely acknowledging my presence, and something inside me snapped. I could no longer pretend that everything was fine. I could no longer swallow the hurt, the anger, the betrayal. The weight of it all crushed me, and as I lay awake that night, I realized I couldn't continue living like this, in a marriage that had become nothing more than a hollow shell. I had to do something, anything, to reclaim my life. And deep down, I knew Rogelio wasn't just a source of comfort anymore. He had become the catalyst for a change I hadn't seen coming. When Enrique finally passed out on the sofa, I retreated to my room, but sleep evaded me. My mind was restless, swirling with 1,000 thoughts I couldn't quiet. I felt suffocated by the weight of the day, so I got up, desperate for a moment of solitude, a place where I could breathe. The bathroom became my sanctuary, a refuge from the chaos that was my mind. I turned on the shower, and as the hot water cascaded over my tired body, I felt some of the tension start to melt away. I closed my eyes, hoping that in this brief, quiet moment, I could escape the whirlwind of emotions churning inside me. But then, the unexpected happened. The sound of the bathroom door creaking open sliced through my fragile peace, and my heart immediately leaped to my throat. My eyes flew open, and standing there, in the doorway, was Rogelio. His presence filled the small space, and I could feel my pulse quicken, every nerve in my body suddenly on high alert. "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were in here," he muttered, but he didn't turn around. He didn't leave. Instead, he stood there, staring, his eyes locking with mine in a way that made my breath catch in my throat. If you are still watching this video, and find these lessons useful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. There was something different in the way he looked at me, a burning intensity that sent shivers down my spine. I could feel my heart pounding, my pulse racing with a strange mixture of fear and something else, something dangerous, exhilarating. My body betrayed me, reacting before my mind could scream at me to tell him to leave. I wanted to speak, to push him away, but instead, an undeniable wave of excitement coursed through my veins. Rogelio didn't move back. He closed the door behind him, sealing us in this intimate, forbidden space. His heavy breathing filled the room, and the air grew thick with tension. "Valentina," he whispered, his voice low, rough with desire, "I can't take it anymore. I need you." His words were like gasoline on a fire, igniting something wild inside me. My body trembled uncontrollably, every fiber of my being aware of his closeness, the heat radiating from him, the way he looked at me as if I were the only thing in the world he could see. I knew it was wrong. Every rational thought screamed at me to stop this, to push him away, to tell him to leave. But I couldn't. I was mesmerized, intoxicated by the intensity of the moment, by the raw, magnetic energy that pulsed between us. My hand moved on its own, pulling back the shower curtain, exposing my bare, wet body to him. For a moment, Rogelio stood frozen, his eyes darkening with desire as they roamed over me. Then, with a quick, deliberate movement, he stepped toward me, closing the distance between us. His hands found my waist, pulling me against him, and the sensation sent a shockwave of heat through my body. The moment our lips met, it was like an explosion of pent-up longing and emotion, a release of everything we had both kept buried for far too long. His touch was urgent, almost frantic, and I responded with a fervor I didn't know I possessed. There was something primal, almost animalistic in the way he kissed me, as if he had been waiting for this, hungering for this as much as I had. The intensity of it all overwhelmed me, and I surrendered completely, lost in the storm of desire that consumed us both. His hands glided over my body with an intimacy I had never known before, each touch awakening a primal fire deep within me that I didn't even know existed. The sensation was electric, as if his fingers could read the very core of my soul, igniting desires long suppressed. The water from the shower continued to cascade down our bodies, merging with the fevered heat of our skin. The sound of the splashing water was drowned out by our heavy, desperate breaths and the uncontrollable moans that escaped from my lips, each one a reflection of the overwhelming passion surging between us. In that moment, it felt like the rest of the world had ceased to exist. It was just us, entangled in a forbidden embrace, caught in a tempest of emotions that neither of us could resist. When we finally pulled apart, my chest heaved, my heart racing uncontrollably. My body was trembling, not just from the aftershocks of pleasure, but from a mix of fear, guilt, and the raw intensity of what had just transpired. Rogelio's eyes met mine, dark with a mix of satisfaction and something deeper, regret, maybe, or perhaps the realization of the boundary we had so recklessly crossed. "This shouldn't have happened," he muttered, his voice heavy with conflict, but I could hear the hollow emptiness in his words. There was no true conviction behind them, no real intent to stop what had been set in motion. We both knew we had plunged into dangerous, uncharted waters, and there was no going back. As the days passed, the pull between Rogelio and me grew stronger. It was like gravity itself was drawing us together, and resisting it became impossible. Every time Enrique left the house, the opportunity was too tempting to ignore. We would find ourselves in each other's arms, our bodies hungrily seeking the connection we both craved. Each time felt more urgent, more desperate, as though we were trying to grasp onto something we knew couldn't last. But the weight of my guilt began to suffocate me, pressing down on my chest like a vice. I was betraying my husband. There was no denying it. And yet, I felt as though I was already lost to him. Enrique wasn't the man I had married anymore. Our love had withered, replaced by a sense of duty and obligation, while my heart and soul longed for Rogelio. The internal war raged on, but I could feel the tipping point approaching. After another night of passion with Rogelio, lying naked in his bed with the remnants of our shared desire still hanging in the air, I knew something had to give. The guilt was eating me alive, and the lies were becoming unbearable. "Rogelio, I can't do this anymore," I whispered, my voice quivering with the weight of my decision. "I need to end things with Enrique. This isn't fair to anyone." For a long moment, Rogelio said nothing. He just held me tighter, as though he was afraid to let me go. "I know, Valentina. I can't keep living this lie either. But what happens after? What will we do? What will people say?" His voice was low, filled with uncertainty, fear, and a hint of sorrow. He was right. Society would tear us apart. We both knew it. People would judge, whisper behind our backs, label us with words we weren't sure we could bear to hear. But even so, I couldn't keep up the charade. Living in a web of deceit was slowly killing me from the inside. I had to face the truth, both for myself and for those I had deceived. That night, when Enrique finally stumbled through the front door, slightly drunk as usual, I was waiting for him in the living room. The weight of the decision I was about to make hung over me like a storm cloud, but for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a sense of clarity. "We need to talk," I said, my voice stronger than I expected, though my heart was pounding. Enrique looked at me, confused, and then scoffed, waving me off with a dismissive laugh. "Now, can't it wait until tomorrow?" But I knew, deep down, there was no more waiting. Tomorrow had come, and it was time to face the storm. The room seemed to freeze as those words left my mouth. Enrique's face shifted from confusion to disbelief. The laughter that had danced on his lips moments before now vanished entirely. He stared at me, as if trying to comprehend the weight of what I had just said. "Are you serious, Valentina? You're leaving me? And where exactly are you going to go? Back to your parents' house like some rebellious teenager? Or is there someone else waiting in the wings?" His tone was sharp and laced with sarcasm, but beneath the sting of his words, I could see a flicker of genuine concern, a desperation in his eyes that hadn't been there in so long. I forced myself to breathe, to stay calm despite the swirling storm inside me. "Yes, Enrique, I'm serious. I can't keep living like this. We're both suffocating. I'm not happy, and if you're being honest with yourself, you're not happy either. We've been living in denial for far too long. This marriage ended long before tonight." He blinked at me, shaking his head in disbelief, as if trying to fit the pieces of a puzzle that no longer made sense. "What changed, Valentina? Why now? What made you suddenly decide to blow up our life?" I held his gaze, feeling the weight of the truth pressing down on me. I had rehearsed this conversation in my mind 1,000 times, but now that it was here, I realized no amount of preparation could lessen the blow. "I met someone," I whispered, knowing full well the pain these words would cause. "Someone who made me see how deeply unhappy I've been, how much I've been lying to myself. I can't keep pretending to be someone I'm not, living a life that no longer feels like mine." Enrique's expression shifted again, this time to something colder, harder. His eyes narrowed, his jaw tightened, and his voice dropped to a low, dangerous whisper. "Who is he?" The question hung between us, thick and suffocating. I had known this moment would come, the moment when the full weight of my betrayal would fall. The silence was unbearable. crushing. My chest tightened as I struggled to find the courage to speak. When I finally opened my mouth, the truth came out in a voice so small it barely felt like my own. "It's your father." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. For a second, I thought Enrique hadn't heard me. His face remained blank, as if the words hadn't registered. But then, slowly, the color drained from his face. His expression morphed into something unrecognizable, a cocktail of shock, anger, and devastation that I had never seen before. "My father," he spat, his voice trembling with fury. "You're telling me you've been cheating on me with my father?" He stood abruptly, his hands shaking, his entire body trembling with a rage that radiated off him like heat from a wildfire. I had never seen him like this, not even on his worst days. His eyes bore into mine, demanding an explanation, an answer, something to make sense of the insanity I had just confessed. "Yes," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know it's unforgivable, and I know how awful this must sound, but it's the truth. I never meant for any of this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. But I can't keep living a lie." Enrique let out a bitter, desperate laugh, his face twisting in disbelief. "So, what now, Valentina? You're going to throw away everything we've built for an affair with a man who could be your father? You're going to destroy our lives for some sick, twisted attraction to him? This is insane, Valentina. This is an unforgivable betrayal." His words cut through me like knives, each one digging deeper than the last. I felt my chest tighten, my vision blur with tears that I fought to keep at bay. I wanted to scream, to tell him that I never meant for this to happen, that I never planned for things to get this far. But the truth was undeniable, no matter how much I wished it wasn't. I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. If you are still watching this video, and find these lessons useful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. "I'm sorry, Enrique," I choked out, my voice breaking under the weight of my guilt and shame. "I never wanted this, but I can't change how I feel. I've tried to fight it, I've tried to deny it, but it's real. So here I am, standing on the edge of a future I never saw coming. I am engaged to Rogelio, the man I never imagined would become the love of my life. And if you ask me, I will proudly tell you, yes, I am engaged to my ex-husband's father. And I have never been happier. This is my truth, a truth shaped by heartbreak, betrayal, and scandal. But also by love, renewal, and the courage to embrace a future I had never dreamed of. Our story may be unconventional, and perhaps it will never be understood by those looking from the outside, but for me, it is everything I never knew I needed. And that, in the end, is what matters most. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope that, through my journey, you found something to reflect on in your own life. What have you learned so far? Comment below one thing you've taken from this story that you will bring into practice in your life. If you liked this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support means the world to us, and we can't wait to bring you more content that resonates with your heart.